Welcome to another episode of Into Final Thoughts. Before we jump into it, I want to tell you to check out our official partner of this season of Into Final Space, Cartoon Crave. Cartoon Crave is an incredible network and news source for all things animation, including Final Space. To learn more, check them out on Instagram at cartooncrave_ and at the Cartoon Crave on Twitter. Now, let's get into the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Into Final Thoughts. My name is Gabe Jones, host of the podcast. I am here, as always, with my wonderful co-host, creator of Final Space.
Hello! It's me, it's Olan, the executive producer, creator, writer. I just Final Space. I just
do a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything. Hands in all different pots. And then also we got a special guest, Benjamin Bjelajac, or Ben Bjelajac, supervisor director of Final Space. Ben, say hi.
Hello, everyone. Don't worry about the pronunciation of that last name. I don't.
I want everybody to try to spell it blindly.
Yeah. Go on Twitter right now as you're listening to this episode. Tag Olan and I, and just try to spell Ben's last name. Just go for it. I want to see guesses.
No cheating.
No cheating. Don't look at the title of this episode. Just go to Twitter. Welcome one and all to episode 5 of Into Final Thoughts. This is a good episode. Before we jump into it, I do have a special announcement. Something I've been wanting to do for a long time that a lot of people have been asking me about. But we're finally getting episode transcripts, which is really, really cool. Cool. Steve, who you might know as Iris on Twitter, messaged me the other day, and she is taking the charge and writing up transcripts for our hearing impaired, as well as those who are listening that speak other languages, so you don't have to jump back 5,000 times to try to figure out what we said. So you can find all those. They're going to be going up on GabrielWJones.com/IntoFinalSpace. We're going to have all those episodes for you now. You can see an example at the moment of episode 1, like the very first episode of Into Final Space. We did as kind of a test. She's going to be generating each one, trying to catch up with Into Final Thoughts, and then going all the way back to the beginning, giving you transcripts for every episode of Into Final Space, which is really, really cool. So thank you, Steve, for that. Let's get into episode 5. Of course, spoiler warning, as always. Stop now if you haven't actually seen it. Go watch it and then come back, because we're going to be talking about a major episode. It's a big one. So, let's get into it. Massive episode. I'm actually going to throw the first episode to Ben. So Noel and I were talking about this episode after I watched it. He's telling me something that you said to him was that you, quote, made something that was art. I was wondering if you could dive into that statement a little bit and tell us that story about, going into this episode and seeing the final product. And I completely agree with you, but I'm interested in hearing the story behind that.
Well, I will thank you for that compliment, Olan. Making art is what we strive to do every day. I'm glad we got to it in season 3, episode 5. I don't know. This was one of the episodes that, when Olan and I were kicking around story ideas in season 2, I think he asked me at lunch one day when we were getting chicken tenders, what would be my ideal Final Space episode if I could ever write one. And I always said I wanted to make a Quinn episode because she's just the most capable character from the get-go. Yeah. And I wanted to really explore why and how she's just that great. We kind of lost her, and it was really, we had a Nightfall replacement in season 2, but it just, I missed Quinn in my life. So I'm glad that we got this opportunity to give her kind of her own episode, at least most of the episode.
Yeah. I mean, and it was kind of interesting in the, I remember that like in season 2, because it's like, we had originally had that idea of kind of Quinn floating alone in space at the cold opens, and then kind of, notes took us in a different direction. But we always kind of wanted it to spotlight Quinn in an interesting way. And then when we got to kind of season 3, it was like, yeah, we're going to do this. And we're going to kind of, make her a big element of season 3. And I remember when we got to kind of like the scripts, ahead of time, I was like, hey, Ben, it's like, what script you want to write? And he just kind of zeroed in on the outline that we had for Quinn, and he took it and just kind of ran with it. And it's really, I think, probably one of my favorite episodes of this season.
Yeah.
It's really probably visually one of the most striking ones.
Oh, absolutely.
That I think that we've ever done. And the story goes in such a heartfelt kind of, emotional territory that, we've done emotional things before. We've done things that, kind of try to push the envelope a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
And I think this one kind of hits all the cylinders at the right moment and the right time. And it's all very well balanced, And I think the hardest thing for this one was like, how do we implement a little bit of that, that comedy, but doesn't overtake the story.
Oh,
like
yeah.
it has to be like backseat. And then I'm talking like not just the backseat, like in a 12-seater van. It's very, very backseat.
Stuffed in the trunk.
Yeah, because the person driving it's Quinn, and we wanted to kind of make sure of that. But yeah, Ben just really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, and we did get those good comedy moments. Bit of the Katos and Biscuit, as well as just some just Avocado's leg, which we've all been wondering, since that concept art came out. It's like, what is that? Is he Invictus possessed, or
there's been more theories on that one image than I think anything. Like it's like I've seen chains of like, this is what could happen if it is possessed. It's this. And every time I just kind of got a good chuckle out of it, because I'm like, it's such a nonchalant kind of very SpongeBob-esque joke. It's just Kevin lifts it up about, you don't skip leg day, and then you see this like rippling kind of leg, and he just kind of puts it back down. I love that. I love those kind of jokes.
Fun fact about that joke, that's not actually a drawing. That's Alan Hune's leg. We just took a picture of it.
Really?
My assistant director, Alan, who is one of the more capable artists I know. Yeah, that's his leg. He's also a very capable, leg day connoisseur.
Oh yeah, absolutely. For those who are connoisseurs of the podcast, we did an episode with, I think we've done 2 episodes with Alan. He's a really fun guy. I happen to follow him on Facebook and just see him as he's growing through his quarantine workouts. He's quite impressive and quite ripped. So
listen, you're gonna see him with his shirt off, whether you like it or not. So just embrace it. He's got great art. He's a great dude.
Oh yeah,
and his shirt will be off.
Yeah. We got the great moment of Avocado's leg, his eye popping out, which was both gross and funny. Of course, I gotta talk about liquefied mooncake rolling around on the floor. I think, we're playing with like the situations like this is like a very intense, situation, and we have like the gravity pressing down on them. It's just those moments of fitting in that comedy. It's very Final Space.
Yeah. And we try to stay within that situation. And I think that was kind of like, this one was probably like, I want to say one of the most challenging ones to balance, because we're still in kind of like the first half of the season,
Yeah.
And so we can't, I think, anytime that we kind of do something that's like full on drama mode that isn't towards the end of the season, we kind of, there's more of more focus on it. But this one, it seemed like to be universally really, really loved. And I think it's just a testament to how nice it was, just genuinely, really crafted by Ben and his team, because it's when you get a script, you can there's so many places you can go. There's so many shots you can take it. There's so many kind of, parts of that story that you can kind of unfold it from just dialogue. But visually, I think, to take those words and amplify it into such a, of that episode, it's like every time I saw it, every iteration, it just got better and better and better and better and better and better and better. And and when we got to the end, it was like, oh my God, what were we doing? It's like, I don't even know what we were doing. But it's like, Ben can talk about just, the long nights of kind of comping those kind of shots. And in that episode, he pretty much touched, I think, every shot, if I'm not mistaken, right, Ben?
Yeah, that was, that was one of those ones that you had to see to know whether you got it right or wrong. Yeah. And when it came back from Jamfield, Jamfield, they have so much on their plate with just getting the structure of a episode down. I kind of come in and they make me look good all the time because I get to comp something that's already pretty beautiful. Yeah. And give it that extra 10%. And suddenly I'm getting 90% of the praise and they're getting 10%. So Jamfield, they're always going to be stars in my mind, even if you don't see them. Yeah. Like you see some of us over here. But I think, there's a lot of credit due to a show like Final Space that's willing to take the chance to let their characters develop to the point of having an episode like this. Because, even in season 1, when we had the death of Avocado, there wasn't a lot of shows that were able to transition from action adventure comedy into that drama. And I think Olan and David really set up a show that allowed that avenue to kind of be explored. And I think this episode was a direct result of that. I wanted to take the drama of that Avocado death and kind of bring it to our strong female character, because I think, the world waited long enough and we needed to hear something about why Quinn was the way she was. Yeah. And I think a lot of that comedy that you see injected is Olan and David's craft working, because I start from drama outward. And I think I think David at one point even saw the script and said, okay, so we're now going to be a show where children are shown dead bodies. Is that how that works? And I said, well, yeah, but you can put your jokes in there also. And then Olan and David kind of gave me an odd look, where are we supposed to put a joke between nearly drowning and seeing a bunch of dead bodies?
Yeah. And I think that was, I think originally it was just it was a straight A story, and then I think it was kind of putting in that B story of Avocado and Little Cato kind of recharging the Lightfold engines. And I remember we got into such we had such discussions about how are they getting out of this thing? What is the, are they recharging and are they not recharging? We got into the thralls of that. But I mean, I think the thing that really resonated and remained true was the Quinn story. When I first read that, I was I wanted to make sure that was something that tonally stayed within Final Space, and that, even in the outline phase, I think it was it didn't really hit that exact mark, from the writer's room. Right. And the writer's room, and me and David kind of did a pass on it, and we kind of tried to, we're okay, let's have it where she's in the Infinity Guard. And, it slowly got there more and more and more and more. And then when Ben got a hold of it, he was able to kind of articulate that and construct those scenes in a really awesome way. And also this is one of Ben's first episodes that he has written, so we really wanted to kind of give him that chance. And it was kind of cool to see, finally, the supervisor director have an episode where he kind of wrote it and kind of visualized it and was able to kind of he knew what he was going for, you know what I mean? And I think that was the cool thing. So with the B story, it was kind of just making sure that it tonally fit within that episode. And there's always that fine balance where you don't want to make something too dark and, too kind of too over the top, Right. And I think this is it hits that nice balance. I think it's one of the most well-balanced episodes that we've ever.
Yeah. I completely agree. And Ben, just kind of coming off that, what was it like, you got to kind of see this vision through? What was it like, especially, with everybody at home, working with the team to kind of execute what you'd written and what you saw this episode being?
I think it was one of my greater honors in my artistic life to be able to kind of, I'm a huge movie fan. I went to film school. So to see people, the written and directed by is the holy grail, right?
Yeah.
So to be given a chance to do that, it's the most terrifying thing ever, but it's also the most fun thing ever. So right when you get over that initial, like, oh my God, I'm never going to work again if this ends up bad. It's nothing but like the most fun thing I've ever done. And I know that my storyboard artist and my team that was with me will say the opposite, because nothing is more annoying than a director with a vision so precise. And when they gave me like veto power to change a script and a story, I'm sure they were like, wait, how many versions of this scene are we doing? This is the 10th, this is the 12th. But Nicole and Johnny and Alan, all credit to them. They were a great inspiration during this whole process to get it where it needed to go.
Yeah.
And shout out to the compers. We never get the compers names. Adam and Bree and Eben. Those are the unsung heroes. Adam is the one who is responsible for all that energy going into the hole. He kind of like crafted that look. And man, that team is phenomenal. And the fact that everyone was working from their living rooms is just,
yeah.
I don't know. I tell them every day, like, I don't know how we made this season. From our living rooms.
I'm actually editing this kind of what next trailer, and it's like there's some shots in here that I'm just like, I don't know what we were doing, or like we were just kind of like, maybe because there was nothing to do that we just kind of turned into the show and poured a lot of that frustration and stuff in there. I don't really know, but it's like, it's kind of insane to think about that we made the show in the first place, but also made a show that I think looks better than the previous 2 seasons somehow. Like it's really insane when I start to think about that, because I remember we had the premiere, and there's people that I have never met before in person. And it's like, I was like, oh my God, I remember I saw Tobias in the car, and it's like, dude, I haven't seen you in over a year.
Yeah.
And I was like in person. He's like, yeah. I'm like, that's insane. Like there's just people that you just haven't, you can't even process it. But yeah, I think, even on the comping team, that's kind of like one area that I think a lot of people kind of, don't really realize it's such a huge part of the show. Like it really is. And every I think every arm of the show is a huge part,
Sure.
But I think the comping usually gets overseen. And after doing just kind of, 2 scenes, like 2 sequences of episode 8, I gained a whole new I always gain a new appreciation when I get to comp a scene, because it's like, it's just so intricate, and it's going into each shot, and it's not just like, you put a blanketed thing across everything. You're doing every shot that you're seeing in the show is being touched. And with most shows, you have like a Family Guy or Bob's, it's like 60 backgrounds, or, it's like, it's the same, you're seeing the same thing. But with our show, we always push that limit to like, I don't even know how many backgrounds we have. Close to 200, I would imagine. I don't even know.
I think it's more. I think that's why Tobias is constantly mad at me.
300 or so. We knew a lot of backgrounds, and I remember forever ago I was at like, I think like a SCAD convention or something like that, and somebody asked me, how many backgrounds do you have in the show? And it's like, at the time, I think season 1 we had 600.
Yeah, something around that number.
Somewhere around that number, and they're like, why? I'm like, because it looks good. It's like,
basically.
My brain is like, you want it to feel cinematic and cool. And, I think we've gotten better and more efficient at kind of telling the story that we want to tell. But yeah, it's absolutely the killer. And I think, when you get that first kind of animation back from Jamfield and it's already killer, and you could put that up, and I think everybody would be like, whoa, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But we're like, how can we just push that just a little bit?
Just a little bit more.
Just turn the dial a little bit more. And that's when you kind of, Ben will go in with this team and kind of really put in that darkness and amplify everything. And
yeah,
after doing that one little sequence in episode 8, which was like kind of like pretty simple, but I was like, okay, I gotta meet their level, like I gotta. So I was putting in the sun and all these asteroids, and I was trying to make it darker and moodier, and it like putting in like little leaks of light, and still I was like, I don't think I got it the same level, but it's close, you know. But yeah,
I love that my team does like a shadow pass on characters, and Olan decided to put like a full-fledged star exploding in his scene. You definitely made that harder on yourself, but it's a gorgeous sequence.
Yeah, I mean, I had to meet that same level, you know what I mean? And I feel like, you know, there's times where I look at a lot of stuff that, you know, they've done in certain episodes, and, you know, even you and you know, Adam and all them, and I feel like it's just like, I don't even know how they do that, you know? And I know After Effects for you know, I'm self-taught, but I don't know the, you know, the ins and outs of all of it. But there's just some stuff that I'm just kind of always blown away by, of how good it can look, you know? And that gets me excited, you know, of just kind of the future stuff, but also just kind of, you know, where eventually Final Space could go if it ever does get picked up for that season 4. But it's like, this is like where we would, in me personally, where I would, the tone that I would want to be the show to be. And this is where I think the show is at its best right here. Yeah. And you get to see a lot more episodes kind of in this tonal, like, ribbon almost, you know. Yeah. It kind of flows pretty nicely on it. And I think that, you know, the first episodes of a season are always kind of the most chaotic, because you're working with new directors, new boarders, and they have to learn the show. And so it's always kind of the most difficult to do those first 3 to 4. I always feel like those are the most difficult. But when you kind of get into like the middle of the season and towards the end, you really find this slipstream of like, everybody knows it now, they know what they're doing, and you get some really special episodes out of this. And I think this is this one that I think it's just really special.
Yeah. I think a lot of it plays to the dedication of both the Shadow Machine crew and Jam Field to this show. Because at the end of the day, it's not just a job. It's they like the show as well. It's what I always love talking to crew, just one-on-one. It's like, yeah, I love Final Space. I love watching Final Space. I love going back and seeing the episodes as they air, especially Jam Field, you know, coming from these preschool kids shows. And then this was kind of their first stab at something like this, and killing it. I tell Olan all the time, like, I have no idea what to do next if Final Space wasn't an option, just because I can't go to, you know, Bob's Burgers after an experience like this. It's just not any offense to Bob's Burgers, but I mean, I got to have a black hole sucking in all the energy in the universe as Quinn goes through her memories of her sister. Like, I don't know if there's an episode of Bob's that would let me do that. I haven't seen Bob's in a while, but I don't think they're getting that.
I mean, it's a different show. And, you know, I think the great thing about animation is it's kind of, you know, it's only growing and expanding, and people are coming up with some really creative stuff. And, you know, I think me and Ben are excited to kind of keep working together and develop some new ideas and stuff like that if Final Space doesn't kind of go the distance. But I think with kind of like, you know, Final Space, I always kind of felt like it's one of those shows that it's best when you let the kind of artist just create the art, you know, and you got to kind of have that ability to kind of basically, like, you know, step back and kind of find out what people are passionate about and lean into that. And when, you know, obviously Ben was really passionate about telling, you know, Quinn's story and kind of, you know, making you know, kind of the visuals of that episode. And, you know, we're like, yeah, let's do it. You know, like, let's get you that script, you know, to write. Yeah. And I remember, you know, it's always one of the hardest things to kind of find somebody that tonally really understands Final Space. It's a hard show to understand, because it's doing comedy, it's doing action, it's doing drama, and it has at the core of it some sort of Final Space idea that kind of makes it feel like the show. Like, it's not Futurama, it's not Rick and Morty. Right. And so to find somebody that understands that, it's like, it's been really hard. And that's why this season me and David try to write most of the episodes, you know, and we're kind of like, you know, I think the workhorses where, you know, we'll write the episodes that, you know, are kind of the in-betweens, and like we those have to be made. And I think we did some of our best work this season, but whenever you can get to a special episode like this and kind of, hand it to somebody that's really passionate about it, you're only going to get the best work, Yeah. And great thing about Ben is that he really nailed that tone and probably so well that we kind of gave him another script to write. And I think that's one of the great things about, this season is kind of leaning into people's passions.
Yeah.
And if they have an idea, be like, yeah, let's do it. I think that's how you get the best work, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think by doing that, you get episodes like this and the other side, and the closer you get, you get some really impactful episodes when you just kind of listen to the artist and just kind of be like, you know what, do your art, man. And, and just kind of completely back up and like, let them do their thing. And because there's so many artists that kind of, I feel like that are stuck on a lot of shows like Family Guy and Bob's, and there's nothing wrong with those shows at all. I mean, I watch those shows, I feel like they're comfort shows. And I feel like, but there's a lot of artists that have their own ideas. They have their own ambitions. They have their own kind of things that they want to do. And if you can have an artist that kind of takes ownership over something on your show, that's like one of the best things ever. And if you have that, you're only going to get the best work because they're getting to kind of do the things that they've always wanted to do and get paid for it. And that's the dream. It's like you just kind of say, hey, make your art and you're going to get paid for it. And let's just try to get that vision across as best as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving a bit more from the art side into our next section. So jumping into more of the story side of it, we finally got a really good glimpse into Quinn's past, and we talked about Quinn a lot. I mean, you've mentioned in the past that she's kind of the main character of Final Space told through the lens of Gary. What was kind of your inspirations for this life that you gave her? Her story with the Infinity Guard, and of course the the Room of Dead Bodies, and Avery. We'll dive into Avery a little bit, but just starting back with a bit of Quinn's backstory. What's up with all that?
Olan, do you want to take this, or do you want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Quinn is consistently in every episode that she is in has been the most capable member of the team squad.
Absolutely.
And I think that was a really interesting aspect to her. And there's character traits and archetypes for a reason, right? And I think Quinn is that silent soldier. Like ethics, unbreakable ethics and morality. Always does what she thinks is right. Doesn't care if the rest of the Infinity Guard thinks that her theory is nonsense. She goes after it.
Sure.
And that's a compelling character because the stakes are always highest for them because moral integrity is everything. So when you have a character that's built on that foundation, kind of exploring how that foundation was built is an exciting challenge. And I think having a rivalry with Avery was a great way to show why she's so good at what she is, because she was battling the best.
Yeah.
She was sparring with wolves. She wasn't with like the puppies.
Right.
It's my metaphor for it.
Yeah.
So, like when she goes down and she dives for that little device that we see when they're in the water in the lake, that's just a real competition between sisters, like who can hold their breath the longest, who can stare death in the face and accept that challenge. And we actually had a few different flashbacks that didn't make the final draft that were equally as I would say a little bit disturbing.
Oh.
a little competitive. There was a lot of boot camp stuff that I think we just had to cut for time.
Yeah.
That I would have loved to explore, but I think the story benefited from that brevity. And I think those moments that we see of Quinn are all character building to get her to be that character that Gary fell in love with.
Yeah. And I remember there's a couple scenes that were kind of on the chopping block, and And I remember there were a couple scenes that you're like, oh man, it was probably the toughest, I think, for you, because we always have to meet that time of 21 minutes. That's the time. Nothing can be over it, or it just has to meet that time.
Yep.
And so there was a couple scenes that were just like, pretty impactful Quinn moments that I would, and they were always on the chopping block, because it was like, is the Quinn stuff too long? And I was like, no, we're keeping it. And Ben would text me, thank you. It's like, and it was kind of those a couple of those moments where it's like, this was the episode. We want to keep that long. Let's cut everything else. There's other stuff that we can cut. And I think with the coolness of this episode is kind of really seeing that rival between two sisters, but something that keeps escalating. It keeps getting more intense every time you see them, and you start seeing that there's a lot of resentment in Avery for basically Quinn being the older sister, and kind of getting this idea that she's going to be, the leader, she's going to kind of excel more than Avery. And being a younger brother in that sense, I've seen that relationship even with my own brother, who kind of is, aces everything that he's ever done. He's in the Air Force, flies jets and all this stuff. He's always excelled, where it's like, I've always felt like I had to play catch up. And I think that's Avery, is that she kind of is at a point where she just wants nothing to do with Quinn, because there's a lot of jealousy and resentment built up over their entire relationship, And I think it's sad when you have that, because I think it was bred, that competition was bred basically from their parents, And, both of them are in the Infinity Guard. And so you have these two parents that are kind of, training their kids at a very young age to basically be leaders.
Right.
And, you kind of see the more reckless one. And in that kind of instance, the mom kind of, easily sees that Quinn is going to be the kind of person that probably to excel the most. And so I think it's a cool dynamic to see, for sure.
Yeah.
And I wish that we could have actually have had more Quinn stuff, there was so much good stuff. And, but I'm really happy with the stuff that we were able to keep.
Yeah.
And it would have been a disservice to the character to try to even cut anymore. And there's always trims and stuff to make the story play better. And I think it definitely plays really nice. But, if there was ever the kind of the Ben Bjelajac cut, it probably would have been, 26 minutes, and you would have probably had awesome Quinn stuff throughout the entire thing. And that's the best case scenario, is like, if you could have that extra little time, I think a lot of episodes in Final Space would actually kind of be helped by just kind of a flexible time, it just to meet at 21 minutes. Even if it was 22 minutes, the amount of like actual help that would give us would be insane. But this episode, it doesn't feel long. It doesn't feel short. It feels, I think, like the perfect length,
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so, and I can get into all the kind of the balance of it all, but I always like this one, because it's just it just hits on every level.
Yeah. I was gonna say it felt right in every way that it could for a Final Space episode. I mean, just between the acting, the visuals, the music, which, by the way, the score in this is phenomenal.
Yeah, they did a really good job with that. And that was such a tough one too, because, I think those guys had probably the most heavy lifting with this episode, because there was a lot of temp love on certain scenes where there's just a temp song that people just fall in love with. And they have to try to replicate that or kind of get close to it, but you can't copy it,
Right.
And we don't have the money to get the rights. So they just have to try to manifest
Right.
that. And so in a way it helps them, because it pushes them, but in also a way it's kind of like it's just kind of, it already sets a bar really high,
Yeah.
And they have like 2 weeks to meet that bar. And we push them, and I think that's the one thing that we try to do on Final Space, is we try to push anybody, but the great thing is, it seems like everybody kind of is welcoming to that push,
Yeah.
And so I think they met it, and it was. I think has just great music.
Yeah, I was gonna say you had a kind of brand newish a music team on this season. What was it like working with them?
With kind of Jake and Jake is back from season 1, and Andrew came back from season 2, so it's kind of like they kind of just joined together to kind of attack season 3.
Yeah.
And we brought in kind of Casey Edwards, who's kind of a guest composer for this episode, and really hit probably the most difficult scene out of everything. And it's the ending scene. You'll hear it. It's very distinct. And, I think with all of those guys kind of attacking this episode, it was, I think they did some of their best work. I think this was probably Jake at his best, and Andrew at his best, and Casey. That's the first time I ever worked with Casey, but I'm assuming probably at his best. But yeah, they did awesome, and they've been killing it in every episode.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, kind of jumping back to the Quinn Avery situation, kind of it's that jealousy that kind of pushed Avery to her ends. Can you talk about the choice of, I think a lot of fans were hoping to see, Avery would come back and, we'd have a sister relationship here, but of course, it's all flashback. So what was the decision process going into us seeing, Avery's end?
Yeah, I think, it's not necessarily, and we were pretty careful to kind of say that she was lost,
Okay. Yeah.
We don't really know
what happened.
We kind of left it kind of open-ended.
Sure.
Because I think it would be an awesome character to bring back, in a way. But at the same time, it also, if it just we don't decide to explore that, and the story doesn't naturally go in that direction, then it also serves as a definite end as well.
Right.
And I think with, this kind of story, it all kind of hinges on, all these characters kind of come from a place of a really broken, traumatic beginning,
Right.
And it might hit them at different times in their lives, but all of them have had it rough, and that, everybody in life has a rough life at some point.
Sure.
Nobody is immune to having traumatic or, kind of really hard times in their lives. So I think it's something that instantly everybody can relate to in some way, whether or not it's, you have a parent die, whether or not you have a rivalry between two siblings, whether or not you kind of, experience all this. It's something that, you can relate to in a way where you're seeing people that are kind of coming from very fractured beginnings and only becoming stronger together, like the pieces kind of fit together. It's like a cracked kind of piece of like a vase, but somehow each piece is kind of making the vase stronger because it's this just found family.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably one of my favorite elements of this episode is how the story is actually told. You're getting an element of the sickness that's kind of being affected by the black hole in a really kind of, it's accelerating things. And I think a cool thing that Bing can kind of discuss is kind of like, how do we tell that story that tells it in real time and not just flashbacks? Because it is happening to her in real time.
Right.
It starts as a flashback where she blacks out, and then but she's like actually in her hallucination. You know what I mean? Like she's conscious of that. And then, you get it again where it's actually Quinn in this younger body. And then it kind of starts to like almost like blur into actual reality. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, Ben, but that was kind of a cool thing where I think that it was probably the most challenging,
Yeah, we talk a lot about POV and what characters' point of view we're looking at. And, so many of the movies that we watch and the things that we consume, we just have this omniscient kind of view of everything. You see what the bad guy's doing, you see what the good guy's doing, you see when they meet. There's not a lot of it's up to you to decide what secret you want to let the audience see.
Sure.
And the fun part about this one was playing Quinn having this sickness was now giving her this kind of role as an unreliable narrator, and her being the kind of conduit to how we're watching this story unfold. We kind of lay down the groundwork for it to be very mysterious. So we only know what Quinn knows. We look away when she looks away, and when she's facing her like deepest trauma, you kind of start to see those two worlds blend together because it's just too much for her.
Yeah.
And I think that was a lot of fun to play with, because I think that's a very human thing. And, animation is so great for so many reasons. When you think about it as like a caricature device, it's for so long we use it to exaggerate comedy. It was really fun to use it to exaggerate kind of just her dread and her fear and her trauma, and really play up that disorientation of feeling this sickness and seeing this thing that she disliked, this monkey on her back that she could never let go of losing her sister.
Yeah.
So when Olan said, she's lost, that's what she is to Quinn. Quinn didn't see a dead body floating in space. She saw this explosion and her sister was gone, and she's lost. And we're not sure where she ended up. We're not sure. We're not sure where Quinn's going to end up, but we know that this is, that it's a good, I wouldn't say that we did it perfectly. I think it was a fun exercise. And I think a lot of young writers and directors should take heed of this idea of POV. And if you want to stick with a character, you can lay down this groundwork for some really interesting stuff using like their memories and their daydreams and their nightmares, and to tell their story more than just a conversation between two characters.
Yeah.
And I think it played out really, really well. Go ahead.
And I think I think like when Olan talked about like, the director's cut of this, I think it would ideally be 86 minutes and it would be a silent film.
Oh man, it would be
just
4 hours.
Two women staring at each other with a dripping faucet and violins.
That's an interesting space episode.
But I also loved how we harken back to, we always go back to the kind of big themes this season of consequences and found family. How we were able to bring Gary into this situation there at the end, when she is facing her grief with losing Avery wherever she's gone. Gary's able to aid with life experience. Can you talk about that a little bit? We've seen the relationship grow a little bit, but this is kind of a new kind of turn for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gary kind of knows in some way what that feels like, and I think that's kind of one of his strengths, is that he was kind of bred in trauma. He was born through it, and I think that basically that's the thing about trauma that I think people who've experienced it. There's no like set time that you're supposed to experience it or go through it or actually deal with it. It just it's a ticking time bomb, and it could go off at any moment. It could go off a year from now. It could go off 5 years from now. But however, whenever you had that experience, doesn't mean that you're going to deal with it right away.
Right.
It just means that it could coalesce at one point in time, and it all came at this moment in time when she was kind of facing this inevitable end. And I think that Gary can relate to losing somebody in such a powerful way that I think those words ring true. He wants to kind of try to reach out to her, and it unfortunately it ends up with Quinn jumping off the ship, and he knows that she's not in the right space. Like there's something happening to her with the black hole. There's something going on. He doesn't know what it is yet until that helmet gets taken off and sees, oh no, this is what is going on. This is now serious. Like we got to figure out what this is. So I think it's one of those things where you get a really powerful scene between those two. And I think that Quinn hears Gary's voice, but the thing that's pulling her deeper into the black hole is Avery. Yeah. And she can't kind of differentiate what's reality at that point. And so she's kind of been told by her mother, and it's something that's probably been beaten into her head, I don't know how many times. It's just that idea that you can't, this is how it feels to lose somebody, and you do not let your sister end up like this. And so unfortunately her sister did end up like that, and she doesn't know how to kind of break from that, and it kind of, I always like things, and I said this before, where you can kind of see a new story point and go back and appreciate things in an earlier season. And this is, I think, when you find out where Quinn is kind of, come from, and her parents and her sister and what happened, you can go back to season 1 and see why she was so driven to kind of not, basically save the earth.
Yeah.
She was born into that kind of mentality, and she doesn't want people to die, but at the same time, she doesn't want the responsibility of having to kind of look after somebody because they could die,
Right.
Like she now doesn't want it. Like, she doesn't want that, but she at the same time can't break from that idea of trying to basically fulfill her job.
Yeah.
And that's what she's, been the entire time, probably the most capable of all of them. And what you end up with is, I think, a really compelling story that only enriches Quinn as a character. And you're only going to see more Quinn. Like it's her story, I think, is really, really meaningful. And I think this season, this is kind of like you're starting to see the effects of having more Quinn. It's like, and it's great. I love it. I mean, it's there's a reason why it's one of my favorite episodes, is because it hits, and it hits hard. And every time I see Quinn, I just get excited, because it's like, I know that there's so much story potential, that just, this opens up so much potential.
Right.
So
yeah. And then so moving from Quinn back into our Ash line, going down to the black hole at the end of the episode, and Stephen Young's incredible delivery of that "we can't keep leaving people behind" line that we saw in the trailer. What have we got coming next? What can you tell us going forward for 6 and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, this is we're gonna get kind of into, once we get past 6, it's like an adrenaline rush. It just kind of keeps escalating, and even when it kind of there are smaller episodes that kind of take a beat, but it doesn't. It still escalates in story.
Yeah.
So I think once you get past 6, which I feel like is absolutely our tamest episode, if I had to guess one, I think that is our tamest episode. And it's not by any means a bad episode. It actually has a lot of great story in it.
Yeah.
Just sandwiched between two,
really excellent ones. Yeah.
Yeah, really excellent. So it makes it feel like it's not as excellent, but it's actually still a really great story. And so I think with, looking ahead, once you get into the 7 territory, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, even 13, it's just a ride, man.
Yeah.
And I think that's it just keeps getting better and better and better. And I'm really excited to see once we get to that 9 and 10, probably after 10, to basically be like, oh wow, I did not expect the show to go this big and this epic and this cool and this dramatic and this, it hits a lot of different cylinders. But Ben, what can you say? What can you say about where it's going? I
think this episode is a really interesting. We talked about it before we kind of started writing it, but we wanted to deal with grief, because we've played with this idea that we're an animated show that's not afraid of killing a main character. And we never really, a lot of our characters went through trauma and grief, but we never really got our hands dirty and were able to address it. And I think this is our grief episode. And Quinn literally chasing this ghost of her sister, I think is a perfect example of how someone grieves. And I think this is beyond, Stephen Yoon has that amazing line that I think kind of steals the show, but I think it's Gary's speech to Quinn as she's running after Avery. that really like is my favorite moment of any Final Space episode, because I think it's the full maturation of Gary, and I think it's the full maturation of Olan as a voiceover actor, because the way that he delivered that line, he's speaking to grief. And you can hear it in Olan's voice. Like, he knows that this happened to her, but he also knows that the only way to get over it is to carry her sister on with her and keep that spirit alive. And that's how Avery now lives on. And I think with that idea of how to handle grief and that lesson that Quinn learns, I think that's kind of what every Final Space fan needs to hold as we go through the rest of the season. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, but we know that, there's some grief, and how characters live on is through each other.
Yeah.
And there's a moment in, I think it's 9, and it's not giving anything away, where every character is kind of like thinking about characters outside of our main circle. And it's like a funny little like, oh yeah, like these are the only characters we know. Who else is out there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Final Space is a big, wide place, and there's other people there.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that is a excellent way to wrap up this episode. So thank you so much, Ben, for joining us on this episode of Into Final Thoughts. It has been lovely to have you on. Like I said at the top of the episode, if you haven't yet, check out GabrielWJones.com/IntoFinalSpace to read transcripts of these episodes. Once again, thank you, Steve, for your dedication to the show and for making this work for us. As always, Olan, thank you for joining us. And of course, see you next week for Artemis episode number 6. Make sure to follow us at Final Space, at Into Final Space, and make sure to follow the podcast on your chosen podcast platform. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, do us a solid, rate us 5 stars, leave a nice review. It'd be super awesome. It helps us get into their algorithm and helps people see the show. And that's it for this one.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah.
This is the best job I ever had, and it wouldn't happen without people watching it. So thank you. Be safe. Treat each other well.
Yep. And we'll see you next time on Into Final Space. Thanks, guys.